Live.
All right, guys, welcome in to week 13 of the NFL. We're coming off a big, huge NFL weekend, and we got a ton of games to break down, including the Thanksgiving Thursday matchups. We'll get to it on the other side. We'll see you soon.
Give a damn about a hater when I feel like it. Not today, not today, not today, not tomorrow. Get out my way, please. I'm trying to get paid. Not today.
All right, we are cruising along here, heading into week 13. This is a unique week, so we are filming a bit early here. We have a ton of games on Thursday Night Football. I think we have 3 matchups, and then we are headed into the normal slate. So we are going to first start out with one of the, Thursday hallmarks. That is the Detroit Lions always playing ball on Thanksgiving, and this year they're going to be going up against the Chicago Bears. Our model has this number at -12. Current market is 10.5. Been some early buying for Detroit. Detroit has been rolling this season. We have them as the number 2 pass offense, number 2 rushing offense, number 2 pass defense, and number 3 rushing defense. This is a team that I think a lot of people are now, based off of our comments, are coming out of the woodworks. It's a no-brainer. Detroit's going to cover every game from here on out, and they're going to obviously win the Super Bowl. So I know you are a tried and true Bears fan, Steve. So first and foremost, let's check in with you. We're a little bit past halfway. What is your thoughts? I want to get your thoughts on this game, but I want to get
I'm not okay.
Okay. So talk to me about Caleb Williams so far, and then talk to me about how you think he's going to perform in this game where he's going to go up against one of the best defenses.
Yeah, I mean, that's absolutely going to be the key to the game, and no real surprise there. I mean, you mentioned it. The Bears and the Lions are 2 teams on different trajectories, right? Going into week 8, the Lions were 5-1, the Bears were 4-2. And ever since that loss on the Hail Mary to the Commanders, the Bears have been absolutely broken. 0-4 since then. They went 9 quarters without scoring a touchdown. Now, I will say they have looked better under the new OC Thomas Brown over the last 2 games. They've played both the Packers, which they lost on a game-winning, potential game-winning blocked field goal, right? And then they took the Vikings to overtime after coming back in that game, covering the first onside kick of the season, and then scoring a touchdown to scoring a field goal to take it into overtime. And then they lost on a field goal there. So, for me, the key is going to be, can Caleb continue to improve? And we've seen it. We've talked about it all throughout this podcast this season. He's a rookie quarterback. You're going to expect rookie mistakes. He had a bunch of those in the game against the Vikings. But here's the thing that I found interesting. If you look at quarterbacks who've had at least a minimum of 100 plays, Caleb is 37th out of 40th in pass EPA among those quarterbacks. The only quarterbacks he's better than is Deshaun Watson, Spencer Rattler, and Bryce Young. Like not a crew you want to be a part of, right?
Wow.
And so on the flip side, though, you look at Jared Goff, he's third. He's third in pass EPAs this season amongst quarterbacks. And so to me, like that's going to be the key. I don't think the Lions are going to have a hard time winning this game, but if they do, they want to make sure they pressure Caleb, make him throw, because he hasn't proven he can do that consistently. What scares me, though, is, again, the Bears have been playing better, especially on offense the last 2 weeks. And so I get a little concerned about, looking at the Bears season kind of scope of work and maybe what this new trend may be. But what I will say is if Chicago has any chance on this, it's going to have to be the defense step up, which is going to be tough. I mean, you just talk about how good Goff has been, but he is tied 5th for most interceptions, throwing 9 this season. So if the Bears can win the turnover battle, they've got a chance here. What I'm looking at, though, is Chicago. Again, no surprise here. Chicago has a good defense this season. They're ranked 5th in pass defense, but they're ranked about 20th. They're below average on the run, so they're not quite the prototypical run funnel team here. But I'm looking at potentially Jahmyr Gibbs props. Now, they haven't posted yet. We're recording this on Monday. But David Montgomery had an injured shoulder last week. He says he's likely going to play, but it is a short turnaround. But if you look at that, along with the Bears' propensity to kind of give up the big run, we saw them get kind of gashed against the Vikings. Along with, they're having a pretty stingy pass defense. I'm wondering if there's some value there, especially with the potential Montgomery injury.
Yeah, and I would say, I mean, I think Dallas right now is like so run funnel that it's like you just like have to run against them. But I think the Bears are a good candidate there. I like that angle there for basically trying to target Detroit's running back room there. Yeah, I like it. I mean, to put some stats on what you're saying, I agree with everything here. Caleb Williams, EPA expected points per game, -1.8. Goff added 8.6 points per game. So these are two quarterbacks on the other end of the spectrum. One thing I think that, or I know the model isn't going to pick up as much is, and you've hit it on the head, I think perfectly, which is the defensive side of the ball. And Chicago definitely can play ball defensively. When we're looking at the defensive echo rate, 42% of Chicago's drives are getting to the 40. That's good enough for a top 5 defensive echo rate. So, I mean, this defense is good. And when you're trying to cover a 10.5 point spread, points could be coming at a premium. And this is a divisional game on Thanksgiving. I don't know if I really want to be laying the 10.5. I don't know if this is the type of game that can be the blowouts that we've seen from Detroit. And so I would caution there. It's not something I want to put my money into. And I'm with you. I think overall, Detroit seems like the better play from a money line standpoint. But when you start talking about the spread, this thing is just getting bigger and bigger. I do want to get your thoughts, though, on what we're kind of seeing, this really crowd mentality that it's so no-brainer. Detroit is going to win the Super Bowl. Detroit is just going to cover every single game. Any caution, or are you kind of on board? Like, this team is unstoppable, so just get your money in.
Not for cover every game. Definitely not. And we got some comments here about shout out Chad, saying the Bears look better every week and Detroit's a covering machine here. The problem I have with that is, like, what's the upper limit, right? If you're saying Detroit is going to cover at 5 points, 6 points, what about 10? What about 13? What about 27? Like, at some point there has to be a limit here. And I don't think you can just auto bet Detroit to cover, because those spreads are going to change again and again. Now, I think everyone's going to look at that Jaguars game. I think the 52-6 score, but, like, come on, it's the NFL. Like, that's an anomaly. You can't bank on that. So yeah, I do think Detroit is definitely playing well. And if we can pull up the landscape real quick, not to kind of jump ahead, but just to kind of put into a visual perspective here, you look at teams, offensive and defensively, right? And so if you're new here, that top right corner is where you want to be, where you're good on offense from an efficiency standpoint and good on defense as well. I mean, Lions are the creme de la creme. Like, they're in the quadrant of elite, and they're kind of in their own little, atmosphere, right? And so you look at, like, teams' weaknesses. The Lions definitely have, in my mind, the fewest. And so I think they're a legitimate contender. But yeah, let's not get crazy here. Anyone who says just fade the Lions, or excuse me, just bet the Lions to cover, I beg you to, what number would you not, right? So if you're going to bet 10.5 here, at what number is too rich for your blood?
Yeah, and I want to point out a couple of different things. You're betting into a market. So right now this team is 9-2 ATS. So up until this point, if you blindly took them, you were printing money. The problem is you also don't have like plus 2,000, plus 4,000 tickets for Detroit either, because the market didn't think that they would necessarily be this good. Now we're sitting here. Now the market is caught up to this idea that they're really good. They're the best team in the NFL probably. And so now you're getting peak of the market pricing. So just know where you're buying within the market. You're buying, Tesla stock on the day of the Tesla meeting. It couldn't be more hype, right? So just know that when you're going into this from now on, like, you're not getting any deals on Detroit from the spread, in my point, or in my perspective. So I just wanted to point that out and use some caution. Okay, so you're thinking Jahmyr Gibbs potentially rushing overs would be your angle for this game if you want to have some Thursday action.
Yeah, I want to see what those lines are. We'll run some sims. Shout out Unabated. Use code BTB for the 5-day free trial. We have a sim simulator. I was checking today. There are some rushing props up already for the Bears, but not for the Lions. And I think part of that has to do because of Montgomery's injury status. Obviously, that'll be a huge thing for Gibbs carries, attempts, and rushes, things like that. But that's definitely something I want to eye at.
Okay, cool. All right, I like it. I would be in fully support run funnels. I think that's a great angle. Love it. That's some good Thanksgiving action to be looking out for. All right, staying on Thanksgiving, we're talking Green Bay versus Miami. Some very interesting teams. I was trying to think back of last year. Like, man, these are kind of like the tale of two teams. Now that Tua is back, it's been a very interesting couple of weeks. But right now, we're looking at a Green Bay team that is top 10 in offense, 7th against the pass, 10th against the rush. And Miami, very interesting team. We have them 15th passing EPA team, 31st rushing EPA team. Our model is saying the number should be 5 here. Market is sitting at 3.5. It really hasn't moved all of that much. But what's your take on this? Is the market getting this wrong and it's hard to price because of Miami and Tua, or is Green Bay just kind of going to start to really put the pressure on and just pull away?
Yeah. I mean, this is another one that's tough for me where, I don't think it's, I don't know if it's quite as dramatic as, people may make it seem, but I do think there is something to look at what this Miami team has been doing the last few weeks. I mean, you look back this is a team that lost on essentially a game-winning, field goal at the end of the game against the Bills, right? I mean, they were tied up to that last drive, where there was a minute and some change left in regulation. Then they go on, they beat the Rams. I mean, they won 3 straight. They beat the Rams. Now, the other 2 were the Raiders and the Patriots. So let's not read too much into that. Yeah. But, it's a team that's definitely seeming to find their stride. And you look at Tua's plays, you look at Tua's just straight EPA per play, and I think you're going to talk a little bit about kind of some of these tendencies.
Yeah.
Tua, just as the quarterback alone, is still kind of what you're expecting to get. Now, he's not quite as explosive as he was last year. This offense, at least, doesn't seem to be overall as explosive as they were last year. But Tua is still a positive influence in this offense. And as weeks go on, you expect him to find his footing. So I don't know. I think the Packers are playing real well. Clearly they're fighting for that top spot in NFC North. They got a lot of good things going for them. But this one, I'm kind of glad it doesn't meet our criteria.
Yeah. And I mean, look, I can kind of see Green Bay is a bit of a sexy pick. I'd have to say it's a bit of a lazy pick, but they're getting momentum and you're just kind of, oh yeah, they're better. So I'll take the Green Bay Packers. One thing I wanted to kind of understand, and it's tricky when you're modeling Miami specifically, because of all these injuries to Tua and him missing games and them having to kind of put in backup quarterbacks. I think they ended up playing 2 different backups. Like, who is this team from the statistics? And is there any difference between those first 7 games where we saw basically a hodgepodge of Tua and then backups, and then now since week 8? And I saw something really, really interesting. And I think that I took the screenshot, so I wanted to talk about it. So Eric, if we can pull up that first slide of looking at the EPA per play drop back here for Miami and the first 7 games. So this is weeks 1 through 7, and we're looking there on the x-axis. You can see Miami is one of the worst passing offenses in the league. And it makes sense, right? They didn't have Tua. They were struggling. They were trying to figure out their identity. But then, Eric, if we can go to the next one, what you're going to see is after week 8 going on, they are now the number 1 passing EPA in that sample since week 8. So this is a tale of 2 different teams with Tua at the helm. Now, I say all that, it gets tricky. What does Tua seem to struggle with? The cold. And this is something that has gone back. It seemed to have plagued him last year in Kansas City. It's plagued him in Buffalo. And here we are on Thanksgiving, cold, a high of 32, a low of 24, potential wind. He's going to be breaking out the wetsuit again, I'm sure. So this to me is just so perplexing. You have some good data that says that Tua's potentially the real deal here. And this is potentially a very different team in that sample when he is healthy, when he is good to go. And you may want to say, okay, I believe that. And maybe I'm getting to a buy low spot here. But then you kind of take the weather into account. And he does, I wouldn't say objectively, I would say it's anecdotal that he struggles with the weather, because how do you measure something like that? But when you look at his performance in cold weather, there seems to be a dip here. And so for me, it's really tough to want to be rushing to bet either side. To be frank with you, this one feels a little gross. Now, the one angle that I think Kevin has identified, not to spoil his off the numbers, but is this an over game? Because you're basically buying the Green Bay Packers offense, but you're going to get the potential upside with Tua and his offense, being a little bit more efficient than their numbers might suggest. Any thoughts or feedback on that? Can you buy that, or is that a little too narrative-y?
Yeah, I mean, for me, it's just one of those things where, at what point do you take an anecdotal experience and say, okay, well, that's actually who this person is, versus, either they're due for regression, or again, it was just sort of a super small sample size, and now you're going to see the real deal here. I I don't know if I necessarily. I'm putting it on layaway. I'm not sure if I'm ready to buy
Okay.
it all right now, but I can get there, right? I could probably kind of nickel and dime my way, do some mental gymnastics to get me there. But yeah, it's not something I'm really strong on.
Yeah.
You got a feeling on this?
Yeah, actually, now that I say it out loud, maybe I don't have a feeling on it, and I'll tell you why. Because I don't have as good of a strong as a feeling. Because if you're saying this is an over game, you're saying Tua has success because you're not going to have the over hit
Right.
without Miami's side of the ball right there. So if that's the case, and you can get a 3.5, this is the NFL. I think unfortunately, I think you just have to take the plus 3.5. The model's saying here, go with Green Bay. I know how to drive the model, let's say, so I know where it's weak, and it's weak here in these specific spots where these younger quarterbacks have few starts, and Love is literally the cornerstone of our methodology because in his first 12 starts, he was a very different quarterback than who basically he became after that, and those two samples tell a different tale. And so if you include those games, it's going to tell you that Miami is where the value is. But if you discard those games, which we find some reasoning that we might and should, then you get this number. So I don't know. I think if you're going to believe the over narrative, I think you have to believe that Miami's going to have success, and you're probably better off with the 3.5. I guess that would be my ultimate takeaway. So if I had to bet this, Miami plus 3.5. That's what I think that'd be my official pick for this game.
Okay.
And I'm just going to sell the cold narrative. What do I think we see? Yeah. Chad saying cold fade at all costs. But I how do you measure something like that?
Yeah. No, I'm with you. I'm with you all the way on that. Yeah.
Yeah. So what does it say? Are you guys selecting going out? I don't know. You got anything on this for Shotgun Mike?
Or you guys have to be giving out plays in games where the model picks up something but doesn't take into account injuries, news, etc. Sort of. What we look at is quarterback play for. That's the one where we actually individually characterize and quantify the impact of a particular player. Is the quarterback. So, for instance, we've had games where QB1 goes down. We run the model both with QB1 and QB2 to say, okay, hey, depending on who's starting, these are the numbers that we would target. And if it meets that criteria, we'll go. What we don't do is, individual, let's say, you lose one wide receiver or, a tackle, something like that. We don't currently, characterize or quantify that impact to the thing. But what we will do is if we have massive injuries where, you have the entire wide receiver core kind of wiped out or the entire O-line kind of wiped out, like something extreme where we know the number that we're getting that we can't really believe it, right? And in the scenario, right? So we get a team where we have them maybe slightly favored, but we know there's something completely different about this team than every other game in our sample size. Then yeah, we may override what the model says, but it gets a little tricky because if you don't know exactly what that number is or how many points that particular position adds, or that particular player, adds to that team, it gets very easy to kind of buy the hype and maybe oversell the narrative that, oh, this person's out. And I'll give you an example. We had the Bucks. I think it was the Bucks versus Chiefs where Godwin and Evans were both out. And I think we had the Bucks +9 that week. And we ended up covering that game, right? And the whole thing was, Tampa Bay has got nobody to catch the ball. They're going to get blown out by double digits. And, they damn near beat the Chiefs for a little bit there. So hope that answers your question.
Yeah, could have went for 2. I mean, went to overtime.
Yeah, right.
They went to overtime. They damn well could have beat the Chiefs. I couldn't have said it better. Yeah, I mean, pretty much you built, I think people get this wrong. And I don't know why. It took me a long time to click. The biggest thing I can tell you, because we get a lot of critics about using a model. I need you to understand you're using a mental model when you bet. And I promise you, your mental model is so elementary compared to what you can build with a statistic model because you can actually quantify multiple variables. I think we have something like 20 variables in our model. So we have a statistical model that can quantify each one of those things. A mental model is maybe capable of 3 variables, in my opinion, maybe 4 if you're next level. So you just need to understand that if you're betting with intuition and knowing ball, you're just using a mental model. Okay. And so when you're using a statistical model, you can build more into it. But all models are wrong, right? All models are wrong. Some are helpful. And so, in this case, we find that our model is helpful for us to beat the market. Okay, let's head into Arizona versus Minnesota. We're coming off Arizona going up against Seattle and kind of had a poor performance here, but we are going back to the well. We think that there's a lot of value here on the Arizona Cardinals. There actually is 1+4 in the market that you can still grab over at bear with me, BetMGM. +4 -110 you can still get. We think there's a little bit even more value there from an EV standpoint because you pick up the push there, but you don't sacrifice any of your win probability. So Arizona Cardinals for us is an official play at +3.5, +4. I can't lie. I'm looking at these numbers, Steve. This one feels gross. Well, obviously this is a buy low spot. Arizona Cardinals didn't play like we thought they would. That pick 6 for Kyler ended up pretty much being the game and really the cover for us. But when I look at these teams, they're actually quite similar, at least on the offensive side of the ball. We're seeing Arizona number 11th passing offense, number 12th rushing offense, but then Minnesota the 10th best passing offense, but 26th rushing offense. And when we look at equal rate, they both get exactly 51% of their drive to the 40 or better. So from a drive standpoint, they're very similar. So tell me why you either love this bet or hate this bet.
Yeah, I mean, I think this is, like you said, it's a buy low spot here. And I think what you're looking at for the Vikings, at least in my opinion, is this is kind of a tale of two teams. Now, I won't say it's as nearly as extreme as someone like the Dolphins, for instance, right? But I mean, we talked about this in the first few weeks, and Sam Darnold was the darling of the league. Really, him and Derek Carr could do no wrong, right? And kind of how the mighty have fallen in terms of, Sam just kind of slowly dipping back down to reality. You look at their last 4 games, like, yeah, they're 4-0, but I haven't really seen anything that makes me convinced that this is the juggernaut that we saw at the beginning of the year. Last 4 against the Colts, Jags, Titans, and Bears. And sure, again, you're supposed to win those games, and they did what they were supposed to do. But again, I think that you have a team here, like you mentioned, very similar to the Arizona Cardinals, and I don't see anywhere where they're absolutely going to dominate them. If we pull the graphic back up here, the one thing I did want to kind of point out, what I'm curious here is we talk about, some of these things like the equal rate to get into the opponent's 40, but what about the success rate? And we have, if you guys haven't heard these terms, if you're new here, in the description, we have kind of the definitions of what we're talking about here. But the defensive success rate for Minnesota, you can see they're 61.8%. I'm looking here for Arizona to kind of have really that sort of offensive success, especially in early down scenarios. I'm not going to say I'm banking on them having explosives, because that's not something you can really rely on week in and week out. But I think that this matchup against, I want to call them a suspect Vikings defense. I don't want to disrespect them like that, but I think an exposable Vikings defense to the right offense. And I think Arizona is that offense that could give them some problems. So if you're getting anything at 3 or more, or 3.5, or get the 3 in the hook and a little bit more there in an NFL game, I think with 2 pretty tight teams, I'm taking the points here.
Yeah, and I think you're right. The one of the major pathways to success in game states is a kind of a shootout where Arizona's offense is able to kind of outperform, quote unquote, one of the best, if not the best defense in Minnesota, but they have had some suspect games. And I think there's no hope in the world that Arizona is going to be able to slow Minnesota here. Their defense is, in our numbers, 31st defensive. Yeah. So I think that's the game script. It's going to be a shootout. And in a shootout, if you are going to get that game script, 4 points, 3.5 points, like you just said, when it's going to come down to a field goal, you saw against what happened in that Bears game. I mean, they were handily covering that game. And quite frankly, Kyler is playing way better than Williams. Yeah. We're looking at 5.1 points added per game, where Sam Darnold's only at 3 points added per game. So, I think the other thing we're getting here with the model is we're getting we're getting a better quarterback potentially here with Arizona, and a little bit of better quarterback play. And so we're going to have to see that come into fruition, because again, Seattle actually rattled their cage, and that pick 6 kind of was the game. And so we're going to have to see and need to see a lot less mistakes in order to cover this. What the model is all over it. 3.5, 4, get it while you still can. All right. Any last thoughts on this game?
No, I'm glad to be on this side. We have a lot of ugly games or a lot of ugly bets. I'm like, oh man, I really don't. or they don't feel that. I mean, this is exactly where you want to be on a coin toss game in my mind, where you feel like you have an edge with two teams. I want to take the points and get more than the field goal. So I feel pretty good about this.
Yeah. Okay. I don't know how to feel about it. This is definitely not one where my mental model would pick this up, but it is also one where I'm not like, I don't understand it. Like it makes sense. Like, and you can understand the game script. Like there's been plenty of games where Minnesota they have this good defense, but they just get into these weird kind of shootouts that they shouldn't really be in. And the Cardinals are kind of like perfect to play that role. They've had these really impressive offensive showings. This would be the one that we're hopeful to get if we can get it. Okay, cool. Well, we're headed into one more game of the week, another model pick for us. And I can't lie, I love this one. And it just makes me so square, but I love it. Tampa Bay versus Carolina. We're all over back-to-back weeks. Tampa Bay -5.5. We're getting better quarterback play. We're putting the difference here. I'm trying to find my numbers. Okay, there we go. Baker Mayfield, 5.9 points added per game. Bryce Young, -7.5 points added per game. So if I could just sum this up, we're getting the better quarterback. Now, Bryce is getting a little bit of he's heating up a little bit. He obviously had a successful game against KC, who's just begging to lose a game. But again, they snuck it out. But I don't know. I love this bet here on Tampa Bay. They're catching fire. They're getting a lot of key pieces back at injury, which makes me like this even more. But tell me why you love or hate this bet, Steve.
No, I mean, I absolutely love it here. There's really nothing to hate in my mind. I mean, the only thing I think you can say is, okay, are you buying that, since the benching, Bryce Young has really seemed to kind of find his confidence back, find his swagger back. And, they came off, they beat the Giants. They had a hell of a game against the Chiefs, and then they came back. They came back and beat the Saints a couple weeks ago. So you can make an argument that, Carolina, we're kind of seeing them do some weird things like they did last year when they had no business winning any games whatsoever. But I think that's as far as hope goes here. I think at some point you have to actually go back and look at what you're getting on paper and on the field. And the reality is, Carolina is an underachieving team. Listen, I'm hoping for the best for Bryce Young. I mean, I think it was Tom Brady that was kind of going viral for his comments he made a while ago about rookie quarterbacks and how the system really isn't setting them up to succeed.
Yeah.
So I'm hoping for the best from him. But in the meantime, I don't know how you can ignore what Baker is doing statistically or even visually. I mean, this dude is making plays that just don't seem to be made anywhere else. I mean, they're above of what Patrick Mahomes has been doing, and it's kind of willing this team with a lot less. So for me, this is the one I'm trying not to overthink it. I'm glad the model agrees. So this is the one I think on my own mental model, I will look and say, oh, yeah, no, this is going to be a slam dunk bet. Those don't do too well for me. We'll talk about off the numbers coming up soon. So this is the one where I'm glad the model actually agrees with what I think, because as a fan, as a square, I would absolutely jump all over this.
Yeah, and so let me give you some contrarian data points then of why this bet could struggle, or better yet, why 7? Why not 10? Why not 14? I mean, this could be a blowout, right? I mean, your mental model, my mental model, I could go down that road, right? Well, let me tell you this. I agree. Baker playing well. We have number 6th passing EPA team for Tampa Bay, 8th rushing EPA team. Even with all those injuries, this offense is playing well. But the interesting thing about this Tampa Bay team, and you got to update things fast, because when you think of Tampa Bay, I don't think of this. 29th against the pass, 14th against the rush. This is a top, or a bottom 10 defense, quite frankly. And one of the more important stats here, defensive echo rate. So how well do teams, or what is the rate in which teams get to the 40 or better? Meaning, basically, what percent of their drives can they kick a field goal or be in field goal range or score a touchdown? Carolina, 61%. We don't think of them as a good defense. That makes sense. Tampa Bay, defensive echo rate, 59%. 59% of their opponent's drives are getting to the 40 or better. So this is concerning, because quite frankly, are they going to be able to slow Carolina down? Are they going to, Bryce Young isn't playing well. That team isn't playing well, but are you going to be able to do anything on the defensive side of the ball? And again, okay, I can buy that. I can still get to the 7, because in a shootout, we can win by a touchdown, but we're going to need to be up by 14 in order to comfortably cover this, at a 5.5 point spread. So, just wanted to point that out. I think Carolina struggles defensively. That's not the archetype kind of Tampa Bay team I normally think about. So that would be my contrarian view of this bet. But again, Who cares? Because we're on it, baby. We're on Tampa Bay. Tampa Bay minus 5.5. We love it. I don't think, and actually, I want to point it out. 5.5 is key. Hold on. 5.5 is, yeah, water break. 5.5 is key. Once you get to the 6, you lose a ton of your cover probability. 7 is obviously a key number. 3 is a key number, but 2 field goals in the NFL is obviously like we'll call it a pseudo key number. And so once you are on the other side of that 5.5 and you can win at 6, you get a bunch of cover probability. But once you go to the 6, you've now converted all of that to a push probability. So stay away from 6. 5.5 is the number. Wouldn't touch it after that. All right.
Actually, there's a good comment here because shout out Fiji. We need to try to get a sponsorship. That's no Fiji. That's why he's parched. Kirkland ain't doing it.
Mr. Katz, I do appreciate it. And we are a Fiji household. We just are out of Fiji right now. And so I'm repping Kirkland. Also would love to Kirkland as a good brand because we can get golf balls. We can get hot dogs, so it could be a little bit more diverse, but we will be getting a re-up on the Fijis here in a matter of hours. So don't you worry. All right. We're headed into the efficiency landscape. One of my favorite parts of the week, we kind of get to talk about all the teams, what they're looking like, what the landscape is shaping up, how these teams are kind of looking as we take a 10,000-foot view of the NFL. And the one thing I want to talk about is Washington. This team has just kind of come up on the scene. They were literally one of, if not the best offense for a number of weeks. They were the number one offense, and slowly but surely they have just regressed a little bit by a little bit. And they obviously lost to one of the worst teams in the NFL in Dallas last week. So I want to start there and get your thoughts on Washington. I don't know. Are you actually shocked by that? It was one of those things where Washington, in my mind, is like a bad team. They're obviously not bad this year. But I don't know. Are you surprised by that loss? What are your thoughts there?
Yeah, I mean, for me, that kind of seemed like it was kind of a crazy game, if I'm being honest here. Kind of one of those games where, should Washington have done more? Yeah, they did there. They came back. They, missed the game tying PAT, and then Dallas scores a touchdown on the onside kick. And I think they had some other crazy kind of turnovers, if I remember correctly, too, that led directly to points. I'm not shocked, though. I think this is kind of on par for what you'd expect. I mean, we've been saying it all year. At some point, we expect them to regress. And how well can a rookie quarterback actually play week in and week out? Now, I'm not calling for the skies falling. I still think it's a legitimate contender. I think they legitimately can make the playoffs. We'll see what happens with Philly, because Philly is sneakily kind of good in terms of at least a record. What I mean? Yeah, a 2-loss team there. So, we'll see what's going to happen in terms of winning the NFC East. That's going to be kind of tight. But I fully believe this is still a wild card team that can do some damage. They just had a couple of bad weeks.
Yeah, and we talked last week, if we could bring back the efficiency landscape, we talked last week about this parlay that has some value, which is Detroit and Buffalo. After we sit here, we're 12 weeks through the NFL. We talked a little bit about this at the beginning of the show. But Detroit, oh my, is just I was trying to find and think back in my mental catalog of like, who is the archetype of Detroit that Detroit is kind of exemplifying this year, where all of a sudden everybody knows that Detroit's going to win the Super Bowl. It's a shoo-in. Might as well not even play the last half of the season. And we talk about it so much on the show, and really all of what we do, and a lot of our thesis from a betting standpoint is NFL equals chaos. It does not equal order. And that is the one thing I think bettors really struggle with, especially at this time of the year. So are you going all in there? I know we kind of already talked about this a bit, but is Detroit this year kind of the exception to the rule? Because some of me kind of I can kind of understand where like, oh yeah, they're just better than everybody. They're blowing everybody out. But then when you kind of look into some of the blemishes, you're like, oh, like this team lost to Tampa Bay. They should have lost to Houston. Like,
right.
Is this team, like, once we get down to, them having to play better and better teams in the NFC and then in the AFC, right? Like,
right.
I don't know.
Yeah. And to me though, Detroit feels like San Francisco felt last year,
okay.
Where everyone it was a foregone conclusion, kind of halfway through the season. I think right before like Debo went down, they had that 2 or 3 game skid. And then they kind of kicked back up afterwards. They were kind of beating on everybody, and they kind of made their way through the playoffs. They had a kind of a tough game against Detroit. And then we saw obviously what happened in the Super Bowl here. So, I echo that. I think the difference is, on the other side in the AFC, everyone was saying Chiefs are inevitable. You can't stop the Chiefs. They're inevitable. But, this year, do I think the Lions are in the driver's seat? 100%. I think it's at the very least, the NFC is their conference to lose. You can be in a one-game scenario, though, and I'm with you. A feisty Green Bay team. I mean, we saw it last year. They damn near made a run last year in the playoffs.
Yeah.
For me, the jury's still out on what Philly really is. I think they're not as good as their record indicates. But again, one game. Saquon's kind of doing godly things for that team here. I'm with you. I wouldn't make it a foregone conclusion. I would definitely advise some caution. But again, I want to see the people where were the Detroit believers early in the year? That's who I want to see. I don't want to talk to these bandwagon fans.
Plus 3,000.
Yeah, exactly. That's who I want to talk to, because if you were a Detroit fan going into this year, if you said, "Oh, that's my team for a Super Bowl ticket, an NFC winner, NFC conference winner ticket," like that's who I want to talk to, because now it's ARB season. I mean, we got some time, but like we're entering ARB season for you to lock up some profit, in multiple ways. But yeah, that's kind of where I sit.
Yeah, I'm with you. And I look, I'm with you. I'm a little suspect of Philly, but I'm wondering, like, is this to me is like you're getting to buy a good team really low because everybody's eyes are on Detroit, and like there's just value there. In my mind, like they pretty much have on paper very similar resumes. They just don't have these like colossal blowouts, that seem to stick in everyone's mind. So I don't know. I just want to caution there, or at least exemplify there could be value elsewhere, and NFL is chaos. AFC, let's just spend a couple minutes talking about AFC. Is there anything there? It doesn't feel as much like Buffalo is for sure the AFC, winner. In your mind, is there any value anywhere else? Should we be looking towards the Chiefs? Should we be looking towards Baltimore? I mean, these teams are kind of like the teams that always seem to be there at the end. Baltimore is the team that can never finish. Kansas City somehow is the opposite of that, which is like they're the pros at doing this like song and dance of like, are they good? Are they not good? And then like they get to the playoffs and they're like, oh yeah, they're really good. Oh yeah, they won the Super Bowl.
Yeah. And I really haven't taken a long time to look at the odds and run some of the simulations on kind of what this will look like. But for me, the AFC, like that's the conference where I think it's super wide open. Right. And that's the one where I think I want to sprinkle on some of these long shots. Like I want to sprinkle on a team like the Chargers, who have a really good defense, who are absolutely flying underneath the radar. I want to sprinkle on a team like the Steelers. Okay. Now, am I saying I think they're the favorite to win? Absolutely
to
not.
Win the
absolutely
AFC.
Not. Yeah. Okay. Absolutely not. I'm just saying I think that the AFC is so much more congested, where literally on any given Sunday, chaos can happen. I mean, we've seen this kind of stuff before. I mean, you think about the one that always lives rent-free in my mind is the Giants during their Super Bowl run back in the mid 2000s. I mean, Giants came in as like a 6 seed wild card, won every game on the road, and then upset the Patriots to win the Super Bowl. Now, those are few and far between here, but I think the AFC is far more prime for kind of upsetting chaos and cannibalism, where you might have, like, to me, like that maybe one where I double dip one of those long shot odds at plus 12, plus 1,300.
Yeah, I'm showing that anything above, we would make the number for the Chargers plus 1,850. But there's some plus 2,000s and then a potential plus 2,500 for the Chargers to win the AFC. I don't know if those are up to date. I'm trying to see any other AFC teams. Actually, this is one that's jumping off the page. Steelers. We make the number plus 1,000. You can get plus 2,500. The market's this is what this is saying. I don't know if that's real or not.
True or not. Yeah.
It may be closer to 1,400, but even at 1,400, you're getting some value there. Yeah, I don't know. I'm with you though that the AFC seems a little bit more wide open, and maybe there's just more more shopping you can do.
Even that's
Denver plus 4,000 is what we make the number. It looks like there's some plus 7,000s in the market. So if you're a true believer, there you go. Nick's offensive rating. F that. Go get some Broncos to win the AFC. I don't have a way to simulate offensive rookie of the year, so it's hard for me to price that number. I'm trying to think. What's your thoughts on that? Any?
I don't
Those are tough.
know. Yeah,
Daniels
I don't know if
seems like they're
right.
way more efficient, like they're way more sexy.
Yeah, and I think that's the conversation, right, between 1 and 2 there. I get why people are bringing Knicks to the conversation. I personally am not a believer. I think Jaden has done so much more for that team. That's so much more of a offensive rookie of the year story. I mean, literally, you're taking the Commanders, who are they have the second pick in the draft. They're the worst team in the East, one of the worst teams in the entire NFL. And for a good stretch, they were in first place, and TBD on like what their playoff status is. If the Commanders are in a driving seat for a wild card, if they clinch a wild card, I don't know how you don't give it to Jaden. So I'm not personally convinced, but I'm not mad at it if you want to spend your money there.
Yeah.
I've certainly spent my money on dumber things. So
yeah, I agree that he's in the he's a contender. Can we pull up the efficiency landscape? I mean, this is where I would start. I mean, how efficient are these offenses? You could see Washington, by our numbers, is basically top 4 offensive efficient teams. So when you're thinking of offensive, performance, you're going to think of the Commanders, you're going to think of Daniels. And then when you think of the Denver Broncos, you really think defense based off this chart, right? Team that is way better than average defensively and actually below average offensively. So I don't know. To me, I think Daniels would be where I'd be looking, but if I don't know what the odds are, to be honest. So,
Yeah. And I want to just real quick address two couple things. One, shout out Chad. Hey, let us know. Keep us up to date if you like this Chargers take. Again, after this, I'm gonna kind of look back on it, but this one, like quite literally, I think I'm gonna double dip on this one. If you all aren't familiar with the double dip method, essentially you kind of take this long odd play, and then whatever you want to put on that ticket, let's say it's $50, you divvy it up into two $25 tickets, and that way you can cash one out, kind of recoup your original investment plus some profit, and then leave the other one for the complete upside. So it kind of gives you more than this all or nothing, do I, don't I, kind of, struggle you people tend to get themselves in. But the one thing I wanted to look at, the other thing I wanted to address was, again, people saying Daniels is a fraud was one of the things in the comments too. I do push back on that. I think where people kind of get this notion from is, I think the Commanders' biggest hit, if you will, their biggest hit against Daniels is the strength of schedule. I think that comes up a little bit where Washington, I believe last I saw, were 28th. But if you look at all the metrics that you want a quarterback to do, their QBR, their EPA per pass, their total EPA. I mean, Daniels is consistently a top 5, at worst top 10 quarterback in those categories, and you can only play who you play. Like, I don't know what else he's supposed to do. So I don't know. I wouldn't go as far as fraud by any means. I mean, I'm a believer. I think he's definitely shown some regression, but that's expected. But yeah, I wouldn't say fraud. I don't quite believe the anti-hype.
So I'm just trying to find an actual number for everybody. I think most of the markets are pulled down because of the games going on. But I was going to say, because the Chargers are winning. So you may want to make that bet as soon as you possibly can.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Yeah, Chargers. Yeah, there's no way these numbers are right, because you can currently get the Chargers at 2,500 to win the Super Bowl. So we make the number plus 1,800. So these 2,500s that are up here are probably old and stale. And I see some plus 1,100s, plus 1,200s. These are probably more where the market is truly at, and not really valuable.
Yeah,
especially after tonight. But we'll see if they can finish. But I don't know. It could be a little peekaboo. You can take a look after. It could be good. Okay, we are headed next to one of our favorite segments. We're both making headway here. We're going to be talking about off the numbers. This is a segment where we basically use our mental models to make bets. We use our own data. We use the model data. We use whatever, the weather, whatever it is that you think you can do to make a buck. This is that. And so currently I'm 4-5. So but I was like 1-4 or something.
You come up the rears. Yeah, dark horse.
Yeah, same with you. 4-5. And then Kevin is in pole position there with 6-3. He is not here. So we'll start there. We talked about it a little bit at the beginning here. He is on the over 47.5 for Green Bay, Miami. I think I can get myself to why that bet is. These are potentially two potent offenses. You're going to get a little bit of a shootout. Weather really, other than the cold, shouldn't really be a factor. There's not a ton of wind forecasted, but just cold. Low is 24. So, you could see a shootout, especially if Tua and the Dolphins can, put what they've put together in the last 4 weeks. They're, again, you saw the graph. They're the best throwing, passing offensive efficient team in the league in that 4 week span. So Kevin is on over 47.5. All right, Steve, I'm coming to you next. Steelers +3. Let's tell me about it. Why'd you pick this?
Yeah, I mean, obviously Steelers coming off that sort of a shocking loss to some against the Browns last week there. One, I love everything James is doing, by the way. He is absolutely turned that team around. He is national treasure in terms of quotes and everything else. But yeah, so buy low spot for the Steelers, +3 AFC North divisional game. The one thing that I find kind of crazy here is Joe Burrow. We talk about the Bengals and, their sort of expectations going into the season, how they're notorious slow starters, but, Burrow's the man and the Bengals should be a team in contention every season that he's there. But I found an interesting stat that I can't shake it. Okay. Joe Burrow has 3 losses this season where he's thrown 300 plus passing yards, 3 plus passing touchdowns, and no interceptions. He's the only quarterback since the AFL-NFL merger to have such a season of losing with such amazing individual stats. So for me, like, this is just one of the ones where I don't know what's happening out there, but these are the 2 of the most, it's ball kind of thing where Tomlin, no matter how bad you think they're going to do, like, they just don't seem to lose a lot of games. They definitely don't go under 500, but Tomlin's coaching that team, coming off a loss here. And then Burrow, no matter what he does, no matter how much he puts the team on his back, it just never seems to be enough. So with the points, it's too much. It's too sexy for me to pass.
3.
I'm taking +3.
Yeah. Okay. I'm not gonna talk you off the ledge. All right. I thought about it myself. I think there's some potential value. I mean, the model likes this. It shows a little bit of value, and as you get at that 3, you start to go up in value. All right. I like it. All right. I'm on Chargers -1, just like we talked about. I think this is a team that is sneakily good, and quite frankly, Atlanta is sneakily bad. And their weakness is stopping the run, and their weakness is their defensive line. And the Chargers, to me, that's exactly what they do. They just run the damn ball. Now, quite frankly, depending on what happens tonight, this may reopen at 1.5, or I'm sorry, at 3. If the Chargers beat Baltimore, I don't know that this game will reopen or stay the one that it is right now. But yeah, I think this matchup is just really bad for Atlanta, and I think that they're going to get exposed. And I'll be at 500. Basically, that's my thesis. That's my thesis.
Solid.
All right, we are headed in to our favorite part, which is talking about the model picks for this week. Kind of an interesting week. We are coming off, unfortunately, a losing week. We've been 500. We just kind of been chopping the last couple of weeks, and finally had what I would call it like an official losing week where we didn't go 500. We didn't just lose VIG, or we didn't win 1 unit. We lost 1 unit. It's part of the game. We did see CLV, but we bounced back here. Week 13 market or model is currently sitting at 29 and 27. That's good for about 52%. So we're basically right under break even. And we have 2 official plays that we have played. We talked about that. That is the Arizona Cardinals +4, -110, Bucks -5, -110. And then we have this Jets ticket or Jets forecast here, and we don't know what to do with it. We're holding off a little bit because there was some chirping, there was some news that potentially that something was going to happen with Aaron Rodgers and that he could get traded, he could get cut. The market kind of also is a little bit agreeing with us. This thing opened at Pick'em and is now at +1.5. I guess maybe what I mean by agreeing with us is that something could be happening over with the Jets. And so the market is kind of buying early Seattle. And again, we don't have a ton of confidence that we're going to get Aaron Rodgers here. So we're holding off to see if we can get a little bit of certainty around that. If we can, you talked about it earlier, Steve, this is probably one of the bets where you just have to shut up, take it, and bet the Jets, because there's really not, unless Aaron Rodgers doesn't start, there's really not a systematic reason you can justify for not betting it other than I don't want to bet it. And I promise you, if you use that as your threshold, your litmus test, you will struggle, because it's a lot of trickery. And the one thing I do want to point out with these models, good models lose 45% of the time. That's a lot of losing. That's a lot of losing, right? 55% is a tough thing to grasp. It's really difficult to understand. I also want to point out bad models win 50% of the time. Okay. So it's a small edge, and the kind of comfort of all this, I guess the better way of saying it's very uncomfortable. It's very uncomfortable to do this stuff and to work through some of these things. So that's why we haven't officially played the Jets yet, but is a potential play for us. All right, Steve. How are you feeling overall about week 13? How are you feeling how we are, where we're at in the season right now?
Yeah, I mean, I think I like where we're at right now. Obviously everyone wants to win a little bit more, but again, we talk about it. One of the big things about us is that we are completely transparent. We're not going to BS you. Like, this is what it actually looks in, day out. Anyone can get hot over a 5 or 10 game sample and kind of gloat and promote that, and essentially scam people out of their money. But this is what it looks like. I mean, at 6 bets so far this season in NFL, then another 130, 140 bet. Yeah. In college, like it is a grind, an absolute grind here. So I'm feeling pretty good. I do like the card this week. I'll be honest, talking about being uncomfortable, I can be man enough to admit that I'm scared. The Jets, that stinks to high hell. What worries me too is, from the reports I've seen, is that Aaron he's refusing to get medical evaluation because he's fearful of getting benched. So essentially he wants to play. So the question is, what's hurt? How bad has it hurt? And, is that the reason why we're seeing the Jets struggle so much? I don't know. But where we're sitting right now, love the 2 plays, and, hoping for a good weekend.
Yeah. And I think we've talked about it. Injury to QB would be one of the systematic reasons why you do not bet. And so, we'll figure it out. We'll work through it on if we think that this is a good play or not. And it's shaping up that, to be honest, it might not be. I think we'd have to really see a compelling reason that at this point.
Sure.
Like, especially if it keeps moving, like at some point we may have to just buy it just because the numbers are getting too large, but we don't really know what's going on there. And I think there's a lot of uncertainty. Okay. Well, if you guys are interested, over at BTB-Analytics, you can get a bunch of free data, all of the data we talked about today, echo rate, success rate. Not only can you find those data at our website, you can find all of the tools you need in order to make your own predictions. We give a free tool on the website, but then if you want access to the model picks, both college and NFL, make sure you head over there and sign up. We have a number of competitive packages at this stage of the season, so you can get on board and sweat all the games with us and use the power of the model to help you win more. All right, Steve, I think that's going to be it for week 13. We're wishing everybody a happy Thanksgiving, wishing everybody some safe travels. I hope everybody gets to get some great bets. I love the Detroit run angle there for Jamari Gibbs. I think that's going to be a ton of value. So I'm going to be eating some pie and rooting on Jamari Gibbs. I think that's a beautiful bet. I'm definitely going to be taking. And I'm wishing everybody has a wonderful Thanksgiving. And I'm hoping y'all win all of your bets. We're going to be going live tomorrow. Well, you'll be going live tomorrow for college. So if anybody's interested in that, make sure you hang out with us at 7:45 Eastern tomorrow for all of the college plays. Because, boy, let me tell you, it's going to be a busy week in college. With anything else, Steve, you got anything else for the people?
No. Well said. Well said.
Perfect. All right, y'all. Have a wonderful week, and we will all see you in week 14. All right, we're out.